This is my model of a graving dock for Trainz and New Era. So here it is, into a blank layout, and I just want to explain a few things about it. First of all, it's a pretty standard design of a graving dock designed for ships to be brought in and to be worked upon. They can be, this is effectively the dry dock, they can be brought in, and you see here these are the blocks that are used to support the keel, and then usually they use timbers to prop the ship up, but also there's bollards along the side for tying the ship, and there's a couple of capstans here at the entrance and here at the far end for drawing the ship into the graving dock, and indeed for helping to draw it out. But of course they'd use tugs and ropes and that as well. So to fit the graving dock into Trainz, as part of my fascination with docks, you need to only position it at a 90 degrees. If you move it round, you'll see that the if we rotate this, you'll see that it's got a dig hole under it. I'm not sure if that switches round. No, you'd have to reposition the whole thing. So there we are. That's the position that the graving dock comes in, and the reason for this is because it has to fit the grid, and a special part of the grid. It has to fit 4 of the 10-meter grid squares together, because the way in which, if I just bring in some and it's 0, I think sea level is 0, if I bring in some water, then you'll see there that what has happened is that the water, which is on a 20 by 20 grid, not a 10 by 10 grid, I'm not sure if we can alter that. Set ground grid resolution. Delete ground, no. I think I have to go into advanced or something to do that. Anyway, I'm working on the normal 10-meter grid, but in any case what happens is the sea or the water is brought in on a 40 by 40, a 20 by 20 grid. So you need to adjust the graving dock when you bring it in and move it back, so that, and just try it with a little bit of water, so that the water butts up against the gates. Otherwise the water is over the graving dock itself. And I'm just going to remove that water there. Now the ground itself around the graving dock, so this is ground 0 as it were, at 0 feet or 0 meters, but in front here obviously it needs to be the actual depth of the dock, so I'm going to make that -4, and I'm going to use that, and I'm going to adjust all of the points around excuse me, around the dock. And you'll see here that I'm doing it so that the dock itself, the main part of the dock, is in the land section, and the entrance to the dock is at the height of the bottom of the dock, the floor of the dock, or of the river, or whatever it is that this is butting into. So let's just take this all the way along, and be careful and make sure that you get this position just right. You want to try and get the whole of the seabed or riverbed or whatever at that position, 4 meters down, and of course you should expect to have to do all the rest as well. It has to open out into a river or whatever that you're positioning on. So that's going to be your dock, and now if I now introduce water at 0 meters, let's just click on some water, and you'll see there that it's positioned correctly for the gate. If we bring it in there, and I think over here, don't know if that makes much of a difference. Actually, what we need to do is just to raise that very slightly. So what I'm going to do is raise the surrounding ground around the dock. Just by well, that's far too much. So we go 0.05 and use that just to trim back the water a bit, just to make sure it looks correct. And obviously here I've got straight lines. You will want to have some more variation than that to make it less geometric. And so let's bring in some more water at the front here. So this is the entrance basin to the dry dock, and let's apply this here. Just tidy that up a bit there. But obviously it's going to run into the river or whatever, and of course you need to colour, to texture the floor of the dock. I don't know if there is a built-in, I'm just using the built-in textures from the Tame, and where are we? That's the key I want. I think, there we are. That's the one I want. And so I'm just colouring that in there underneath the water. The water's too blue. If anybody knows how you can get different colours of water, it's something I've never bothered to try and find out about. So if somebody wants to leave me a comment, it will help to make this look much more like dirty dock water rather than this rather nice sort of, I don't know, Bahamas blue, whatever. And also, of course, you want a much darker, I think you want a darker texture under the water there. So there we are, and it's a non-animated feature, but it's one that should really enhance any dock layout, and pretty straightforward to use. And of course you can add additional items to it. For example, I think up here I've got some, where are we? Various cranes, not the modern cranes, the travelling cranes. You want to use this with sort of older type cranes, more like this, and just raise it up a fraction. Just to get it on, sitting on the dock. No, that's still way down, isn't it? Oops, that's about it, something like that. Let me turn it round. Every bit's on there, and put some bits and pieces that might be being used to provision the ship or to repair the ship or whatever. So you can add various bits and pieces around the outside. Might be a good idea to put in some cobble. I think these probably, let me see, that's probably the, it's far too big. Take the scale right down. We draw those, because this is the sort of surround that the graving dock would have had, cobbles and some sheds, that sort of thing, brought into the around the dock itself. And obviously I've run over there, but you can correct that. So and now bring in a railway line next to it with a couple of wagons, and away you go. You've got a working, or rather you've got a graving dock as an item within a whole dock area. And what I've also done is I've made the graving dock, and I've also made one with one of my ships in it. So here it is. This is with the SS Waterloo, which dates from the latter part of the 19th century. Here it is sitting in the dock, And first thing to check, of course, is if the water position is, if it's correct with the, and it's not, so I need to just move it. So it's a bit of a mucking about to get it right, but I think it's worth it because it's a sort of feature which I think really adds life to any sort of dock area, and shows the different aspects of docks, and I like 19th century docks in particular, so that's what I'm pitching this at. The colours are about right, surprisingly, quite light cut stones, and it's actually copied from a plan of a dry dock in the Engineer magazine, but also it's very similar to a dry dock that I passed quite a few times going to work. It's still there as a sort of preserved part of what's now become a office business development right in the harbour. And so there we are. So there's the graving dock. I hope you find it of interest. I hope you enjoy using it. You can see it's a bit fiddly to get it right, but when it is right, I think it looks well. Obviously you want to bring in some more pier wall, perhaps just from here, but this part here should definitely extend out into a much bigger channel, much wider channel than I'm showing here. So that if only so that a ship can come up the channel, turn 90 degrees and actually enter the dock. So it has to be a very substantial channel. So there we are. So that's that. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this video. If you have, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube, ING for Trainz. Subscription is free. There's no obligation, no commitment. I don't know your email from that or anything else. There's no you'll hear nothing from me about it. It just encourages me to do more of these. And if you found this video of use, please give me a thumbs up. If you've got a comment, please do leave it, and queries likewise, and I'll aim to answer it. But there we are. That's available to download from my website. The web address is in the comments section, and indeed is on the first piece of this video.